Captain Alaric Voss had seen many things in his years as a space jockey, but none quite like the monolithic carcass of alien engineering that loomed before the Odyssey. It hung in the dark like an old god's forgotten pet project, as dead as his grandmother's sense of humor, and twice as ugly. "Well, that ain't a space mirage," Voss muttered, scratching at the week's growth of beard that had long given up trying to look respectable. "Nope," Leora Cade replied, her voice dripping with the kind of sarcasm that could strip paint. "That's the real deal, Cap. Pity, thought I was hallucinating." Would have made more sense. The rest of the crew sat in awed silence save for Jax, whose constant snoring was a testament to his ability to sleep through an apocalypse. "So, what do we think? Salvageable or just another cosmic paperweight?" Voss asked. "Salvageable, sure, if you've got a couple of centuries and a god complex," Leora shot back. "Let's board it, Voss," a voice crackled over the intercom. It was Chief Engineer Maury, a man who could find a silver lining in a black hole. "Maybe it's full of antique furniture. I could use a new chair." "You're gonna die sitting on your arse one day, Maury," Voss chuckled. "As long as it's a comfy chair," Maury replied with a grin. All right, Voss said, waving a hand. "Suit up, kids, field trip's on. Leora, you and me will lead, try not to lick anything." "I'd hate for you to turn into a space zombie." "No promises," Leora said, pulling her helmet on. The Odyssey docked with the alien dreadnought, the sound of the seal locking into place echoing through the ship like a judge's gavel. "Well, here goes nothing," Voss mumbled, stepping into the airlock. "If I don't come back, tell my ex-wife she's still a miserable." "She knows," Leora interrupted, pushing past him. "And she sends her regards." The alien dreadnought's interior was as cold and unwelcoming as a mother-in-law's stare. The corridors stretched out like the intestines of a steel beast, dark and foreboding. "Cozy," Leora commented, her voice crackling over the comms. "I think I stayed in a hotel like this once," Voss replied. "In a parallel dimension where all the hotels are run by homicidal maniacs?" Leora asked. "Exactly," Voss said, smirking. "Anyone get the feeling we're not alone?" Leora said, shining her flashlight into the abyss. "Just you, and that's because you're paranoid," Voss said. "Paranoid people survive," Leora shot back. "Or get committed," Voss replied. "Same difference," Leora said, pausing at a bulkhead door. "Look at this. It's got more locks than a teenager's diary." "Let's open it," Voss suggested, because that was the sort of thing he did. "I was hoping you'd say that," Leora said, rolling her eyes, "because I didn't bring my bolt cutters." "It's a spaceship, not Fort Knox. Let me handle it," Voss said, tapping commands into his portable console. The door creaked open with the enthusiasm of a pensioner getting up for a jog. "Ladies and gentlemen," Voss announced, "welcome to the alien equivalent of a lost and found." The room was filled with mysterious crates, each one sealed with symbols that looked more like an alien's attempt at modern art. "What's in the box?" Leora asked, her eyes narrowing. "If it's Gwyneth Paltrow's head, I'm out here," Voss said. "You and me both," Leora replied, prying open a crate. Inside, alien tech glimmered like Christmas come early for a kleptomaniac. "Well, if this doesn't get us on some intergalactic hit list, nothing will," Voss said, pocketing a strange device. "Looks expensive," Leora said, examining a gadget that hummed ominously. "Yeah, but even money's got its limits," Voss replied. "Remember, curiosity killed the cat, but satisfaction brought it back," Leora said, smirking. "More like satisfaction got it dissected," Voss replied, glancing at Leora. "Let's keep moving." As they ventured deeper, the dreadnought's architecture became increasingly bizarre, like it had been designed by a committee of lunatics who couldn't agree on what constituted a floor or a wall. "This place gives me the creeps," Leora muttered, her flashlight flickering. "Good," Voss replied. "Means you're not dead yet." "Thanks for the comforting words, Captain," Leora said, rolling her eyes. "Thanks for stating the obvious," Voss shot back. "So what do you think this thing was doing here?" Leora asked. "Judging by the lack of occupants, I'd say it was on a long-term vacation," Voss replied. "Or maybe it's a cosmic ghost ship cursed to drift forever," Leora suggested. Or just another day in space, Voss said. We should leave a Yelp review. 1 star would not recommend. I think 2 stars. There's plenty of legroom, Leora said, kicking an alien canister. True, but the service is lacking, Voss replied. They reached a control room filled with consoles and screens that flickered with ancient energy as if protesting their intrusion. Now this looks promising, Leora said, approaching the central console. And by promising, I mean likely to explode. Only if you push the wrong button, Voss said. Which, let's face it, you probably will. You're a real ray of sunshine, you know that, Leora said. I try, Voss replied. Can you make anything out? Leora squinted at the alien symbols, her brow furrowing. It's like trying to read a drunk spider's diary, she said. I think this one says do not touch. Then it's probably the self-destruct, Voss said. Or the coffee maker, Leora replied. Either way, let's press it. Before they could decide, the room shuddered, lights flaring angrily. Oh, Voss said. I think we woke it up. Looks like this old ghost ship wasn't as empty as we thought, Leora said, backing away. And now we're about to have company, Voss said, drawing a weapon. Better be polite then, Leora said. After all, we are the guests. Yeah, but I'm not bringing a casserole, Voss replied. Shame, Leora said. I could go for some casserole right about now. Focus, Leora, Voss said, aiming at the door as it slid open with a hiss. Welcome parties here. What shuffled through was anything but welcoming. It was a mechanical nightmare, all claws and glowing eyes, looking like a blender that had taken up murder as a hobby. I think it's broken, Leora said. Or very, very angry, Voss replied. Shoot first, ask questions never. They opened fire, their weapons lighting up the room in a dance of shadows and chaos. The creature reeled, sparks flying, but it didn't stop, not until Voss got up close and personal with a well-aimed shot to its core. I think that did it, Leora said, panting. Maybe, Voss replied, nudging the smoldering heap with his boot. I always wondered what alien robots bleed. Looks like disappointment, Leora said, stepping over the wreckage. How the hell did they power that thing? Beats me, Voss replied, wiping his brow. But I say we get what we came for and get the hell out. Agreed, Leora said, before the rest of the family wakes up. Welcome to the Odyssey, Voss said as they retraced their steps. Home away from home, and soon to be a very wealthy home if we play our cards right. Assuming we don't blow up first, Leora said, grinning. Where's your sense of adventure? Voss asked. Packed it away with my common sense, Leora replied. Good, Voss said, chuckling. Then you can stay on board for the next trip. The alien dreadnought's control room, with its flickering screens and indecipherable symbols, seemed to mock Captain Alaric Voss and his ragtag crew. All right, folks, Voss said, eyeing the ancient tech like it owed him credits. Let's see what kind of cosmic surprise package we've stumbled into. Leora Cade, ever the optimist of sarcasm, tapped one of the consoles. Maybe we're about to unlock the secrets of the universe, or just the alien equivalent of a cat video. Wouldn't that be something? Voss replied, grinning as he attempted to decipher the interface. Imagine if the universe was run on cat videos all along. Chief Engineer Mori was also poking around, his eyes glinting with the kind of excitement that usually ended in disaster. Imagine if all this tech is just an elaborate setup for a cosmic sitcom, he mused, with us as the unwitting guest stars. We'd better start working on our punchlines then, Voss said, focusing on the console's buttons. Let's see if we can get this thing talking. Talking. It looks like it hasn't had a conversation in centuries, Leora remarked, squinting at a screen that was flashing ominously. Last thing I want is this ship complaining about its back pain, or yours, Mori added, peering over her shoulder. Bet it's got stories that would make a therapist quit. Voss tapped a sequence of keys, and the console responded with a low hum. Hear that? It likes me. Or hates you, Leora corrected. With these things, it's hard to tell the difference. Suddenly, the ancient ship shivered. Lights flared, casting their faces in a sickly hue. The console emitted a series of bizarre sounds that might have been language if you were generous, or just a malfunction if you were realistic. Did you just summon an alien DJ? Leora asked, raising an eyebrow. More like accidentally subscribed to an ancient alien newsletter, Voss said, watching the screens. Hope it's not spam. Maury leaned closer, his fingers dancing over the controls. Whatever you've done, Cap, you've definitely woken it up. Great, Voss muttered. Just what we needed, an interstellar alarm clock. As if on cue, the dreadnought shuddered again, more insistently this time. Somewhere deep within its bowels, something monumental was stirring, like an old engine trying to remember how to be angry. Should we be worried? Leora asked, feigning nonchalance as she took an involuntary step back. Worried? Nah, Voss replied, though his voice did have an edge of concern. Terrified? Maybe. A screen suddenly lit up, displaying alien symbols scrolling faster than a gambler's fingers. Looks like it's broadcasting, Maury said, rubbing his chin. To whom, though? Let's hope it's not ordering takeout, Voss said. I don't think we're ready to meet the neighbors. Meanwhile, Jax, who could sleep through a meteor storm, stirred from his impromptu nap in the corner. What's going on? He mumbled, rubbing his eyes. Did we win the lottery? More like we found a cursed treasure chest, Leora quipped. And now it's singing, Jax yawned. Let me know if it starts dancing too, then I'll get interested. This isn't good, Maury said, studying the symbols. We're transmitting a signal across who knows what kind of frequencies. Perfect, Voss said. Our stealth mission just turned into a cosmic light show. Unbeknownst to them, their signal had reached a distant part of the galaxy, a place where the ancient Zephyri slumbered in their cryogenic vaults. To these dormant beings, the Odyssey's meddling was perceived as a divine call to arms. Back on the Odyssey, the crew continued to wrestle with the consequences of their actions. Think we should start apologizing now? Leora asked, her tone only half joking. Apologize to whom? Voss retorted. I don't speak alien, Maury chuckled, though it was a nervous sound. Let's just hope they're friendly. And if they are not? Jax inquired, now fully awake and looking slightly concerned. Then we politely explain the misunderstanding, Voss said, deadpan. With lasers. Always the diplomat, Leora laughed. The dreadnought shifted once more, the ancient ship seemingly coming alive around them. The crew could feel it in the vibrations underfoot, like a heartbeat growing stronger. Voss shook his head, looking around. Feels like we're walking inside a giant's ribcage, and it's just realized it's got guests. Guests who overstayed their welcome, Leora added, motioning with her flashlight as shadows danced on the walls. Let's not overstay too long, Voss said, turning back to the console. We need to find a way to shut down that broadcast before it invites something we can't handle. Maury was already on it, his fingers a blur over the keyboard. Give me a minute. I think I can rig a temporary block. Make it quick, Voss encouraged. I don't want to find out what happens when we overstay our welcome in an ancient alien airbib. As they worked, the screens continued their hypnotic display, almost as if mocking their efforts. The atmosphere was tense, each crew member acutely aware that they were playing with technologies far beyond their understanding. Come on, Maury, Leora said, her voice tight. Tell me you've got some good news. Maury grinned, though it was strained. Good news. I found the off switch. Bad news, it might be wired to everything else. Define everything else, Voss said, suspicion creeping into his voice. Think of it like pulling the wrong plug on your home entertainment system, Maury explained. Except instead of a TV, it's a potentially lethal alien ship. Perfect, Leora groaned. Our lives depend on Maury's grasp of ancient tech. Hey, I passed Engineering 101 with flying colors, Maury retorted. Right before you blew up the lab, as I recall, Voss said. Details, Maury waved it off. And technically it was just a small explosion. Explosions, Leora corrected. Plural. Enough reminiscing, Voss said. Shut it down, Maury. Just try not to kill us. Maury took a deep breath and pressed a sequence of buttons. The room held its breath with him. The lights flickered, and the console's hum steadily decreased until it was no more than a whisper. Did it work? Jax asked, peering around like a man expecting to be struck by lightning at any moment. Maury exhaled, eyes scanning the now dormant screens. Broadcast's off. Nice job, Voss said, clapping him on the back. Assuming we're not about to explode. You never know, Leora said lightly. Maybe we're just a delayed reaction. Voss grinned, relief washing over him. All right, let's pack up and get the hell out of here before this ship decides to wake the rest of the neighbors. As they turned to leave, the corridors echoed with an eerie calm, a calm that belied the storm they had unknowingly set in motion across the galaxy. Back on the Odyssey, the crew settled into their routine, though a new tension simmered beneath the surface. Think we really dodged a bullet there, Jax said, as he poured himself a mug of something that passed for coffee. More like a laser beam, Leora corrected, stretching and yawning. Either way, we got lucky. Luck is just another word for avoiding stupidity, Voss said, sinking into his captain's chair with a weary grin. Then we're downright blessed, Maury added, adjusting the ship's systems. As the Odyssey drifted away from the dreadnought, its crew blissfully unaware of the unintended consequences of their actions, the vastness of space stretched out before them, a silent witness to their folly. But far away, the Zephyri were stirring, awakened by the Odyssey's signal. To them, the broadcast was the harbinger of ancient prophecies, a divine message from unseen gods. The time of their awakening had come, and they would heed the call. So, where to next, Captain? Leora asked, leaning against the control panel with a smirk. Anywhere that's not here, Voss replied. Let's find a quiet spot where the tech doesn't talk back. Sounds like a plan, Jax said, raising his mug. Just wake me when we get there. Voss chuckled, feeling the weight of his decision but choosing to ignore it for now. You got it, Jax. Just don't blame me if you're the last one to know when we're in trouble again. Wouldn't dream of it, Jax replied, settling back into his seat with a contented sigh. As the Odyssey cruised through the void, its crew couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy held its breath, waiting for their next move. They were oblivious to the ripple they'd sent across the stars, a ripple that would soon make waves much larger than they could imagine. Guess it's just another day in paradise, Leora mused, gazing at the stars. Paradise with space zombies, Voss added, not bothering to hide his smile. Or space zombies with a sense of humor, Maury quipped. Let's hope so, Voss said, thoughtfully watching the stars. Because if we're going to dance with the galaxy's ghosts, we might as well make it entertaining. And with that, the Odyssey continued its journey into the unknown, the crew armed with nothing more than their wits, a ship that threatened to fall apart at any moment, and the kind of luck that only seemed to favor the reckless. The Odyssey drifted through space like a beer tossed into a cosmic trash heap. The crew lounged in the mess hall, trying to ignore the growing tension hanging in the air like the smell of Jax's socks. Voss leaned back in his chair, feet propped up on the table, eyes fixed on a flickering screen displaying nothing of interest. So, Voss, Leora said, breaking the silent monotony with her usual flair. How does it feel to be a god? Voss snorted, almost spilling his coffee. If I'm a god, we're all in a hell of a lot of trouble. Amen, Jax added, scratching his head. Not sure I signed up for divine comedy. Maury was tinkering with a broken toaster, trying to coax it back to life. At least we're not the kind of gods people sacrifice virgins to. Though knowing our luck, they'd probably sacrifice us. Sure, if they can find any virgins left in the galaxy, Leora quipped, taking a sip of her own coffee, which tasted more like burnt regret. All right, let's get serious for a moment, Voss said, planting his feet back on the deck. We've got a bunch of cryo-frozen zealots out there who think we're their new pantheon. Ideas, send him a sorry, wrong number text, Jax suggested lazily. Problem solved. Great plan except for the part where they might have laser cannons, Voss replied. I'd rather not test our ship's defensive prowess against ancient alien artillery. Maury set down the toaster with a sigh. We need intel. I can try to access their systems from here, see what they think we are. And how do we explain the whole accidental godhood thing? Leora asked, eyebrows raised. Honesty, Jax suggested. I hear it's the best policy. Sure, Voss said dryly. And next we'll invite them over for tea and biscuits. Maybe they'll take a bribe, Leora mused. Offer them a couple of our spare parts. Maybe Jax's socks. Hey, my socks are priceless, Jax protested. You can't just give them away. Let's stick to the plan, Maury said. I'll try to decrypt their comms, see what we're dealing with. As Maury got to work, the rest of the crew settled into their routines, each trying to ignore the looming threat of divine retribution, or worse, divine worship. Voss wandered over to the ship's small observation window and stared out at the stars, a silent sea that mocked their insignificance. We're really in it now, aren't we? Leora said, joining him. Up to our necks, Voss agreed. But at least it's interesting. That's one way to look at it, she replied. Though I was hoping for a bit less excitement, their reverie was interrupted by a series of bleeps and bloops from Maury's console. I've got something, he called over, drawing the crew back to the table. Is it good news or bad news? Voss asked, peering over Maury's shoulder. Depends, Maury answered, not looking away from the screen. If you consider being worshipped as a celestial mistake good news, then you're golden. Is there a way to convince them otherwise? Leora asked. Maury tapped a few keys, bringing up a series of unintelligible symbols and graphics. They're divided. Some factions think we're gods, others think we're blasphemers. We've hit the jackpot on the crazy scale. A civil war in our honor, Jax said, shaking his head. Why does everything we touch turn into a disaster? Hey, if you can't be good, be memorable, Voss replied with a shrug. So, what's our next move, Maury? I'll see if I can send a coded message, something to defuse the situation, Maury explained, fingers dancing across the keys with the enthusiasm of a man who doesn't know he's about to step on a landmine. And let's hope they have a sense of humor, Leora added, crossing her arms. Or at least don't shoot the messengers. Is it bad that I'm almost looking forward to seeing how this plays out? Voss asked, grinning. Yes, the crew replied in unison. Time dripped by like the last dregs of an underwhelming drink. Maury struggled with the alien interface, swearing under his breath as the system proved more obstinate than a bureaucrat on payday. Voss kept glancing out at the stars, wondering if somewhere out there, a group of aliens were sculpting idols of him out of moon rock. Got it, Maury finally announced, sitting back with a pleased grin. I've sent a message. Tried to emphasize the whole accidental part of our divine apparition. And if they don't buy it, Jax asked. Then we play the part, Voss said, only half joking. I've always wanted to smite something. The universe really made the wrong choice when it handed you a spaceship, Leora quipped. Hey, it was either that or a planet, Voss replied. A ship was the safer option. The Odyssey continued its cruise through the void, each crew member lost in their own thoughts. They were dealing with forces far beyond their understanding, and for once, their usual bravado felt a bit like bringing a knife to a gunfight. A very large, alien gunfight. Hours passed and the ship's comms finally crackled to life, a voice emerging from the static like a ghost from a past they hadn't lived. Who speaks for the gods? The voice boomed, echoing through the ship. Great, Voss muttered. I guess that's us. He activated the ship's comms, his own voice steady despite the circumstances. This is Captain Alaric Voss of the Odyssey, and just to clarify, we are not gods. Nor do we claim to be. A pause followed, filled with the kind of silence that usually precedes a bad punchline. Then what are you? The voice demanded. Just travelers, Voss replied. Travelers with a knack for stumbling into trouble. Your message was received, the voice continued, but there are those among us who see you as a sign. A prophecy fulfilled. Well, tell them we appreciate the enthusiasm, but we're really not worth the fuss, Voss said, scratching his chin. We're just trying to avoid getting vaporized. Vaporization is not our way, the voice replied with a hint of what could have been amusement. Though others may feel differently. Of course they do, Leora muttered, rolling her eyes. Look, Voss said, leaning closer to the microphone as if proximity could somehow convey sincerity. We don't want a war, we just want to move on without upsetting the balance of your world. You have already upset the balance, the voice replied, but perhaps you can help restore it. How? Voss asked, curious despite himself. There are those who would challenge the old ways, the voice explained. Your presence could. Encourage them. We're not in the business of starting revolutions, Voss said quickly. We're just passing through. Help us get clear and we'll be out of your hair, tentacles, whatever. There was a long pause and Voss felt a bead of sweat trickle down his back. Finally, the voice spoke again, quieter this time. We will consider your request. But know that your presence here will not be easily forgotten. That's the problem with being unforgettable, Maury quipped, shutting down the comms. Voss turned to his crew, eyebrows raised. Well, that went better than expected. Now what? We wait, Leora suggested. And try not to do anything else godlike. Right, Voss agreed, exhaling. Let's see if we can lie low until they decide we're not worth their time, Jack snorted. If we can manage that, I'll start believing in miracles. The crew busied themselves with the daily grind, trying to ignore the cosmic drama they'd inadvertently sparked. The ship hummed along, oblivious to the chaos it had sown across the stars. We're just travelers, Voss repeated to himself, hoping the universe would take the hint and let them be. Maury worked tirelessly, his eyes flicking over data streams like a gambler reading cards. He wanted to understand these Zephyri, not just their tech, but their culture, their beliefs. Maybe some understanding could save their skins, or at least delay the inevitable smiting. Think they'll buy it? Jax asked, watching Maury work. Buy what? Maury replied, not looking up. That we're harmless, Jax clarified. That we're just tourists with bad timing, Maury shrugged. They might. Or they might decide we're the wrathful type of deity and pay us a visit with torches and pitchforks. Good thing we've got better tech, Voss said. Assuming it doesn't fall apart on us. Always the optimist, Leora said with a laugh. The stars streaked past, endless and indifferent. The Odyssey carried its crew towards an uncertain future, a fragile hope flickering like a distant beacon. Let's just keep our heads down, Voss advised, and see if we can't skip out on the bill. Sounds like a plan, Leora agreed. As they traveled through the void, the crew couldn't help but feel the weight of their choices, each moment a reminder of how close they'd come to real trouble. And yet, there was something exhilarating about it all, the thrill of dancing on the edge of disaster with nothing but a smart mouth and a stubborn will. You know, Voss said, looking at his crew with a grin, we might just pull this off. Or crash and burn, Jax replied. Either way, it'll be one hell of a show, Maury added. With that, the Odyssey pressed on, its crew ready for whatever lay ahead, divine or otherwise. The Odyssey's bridge was a small, cluttered space with more blinking lights and switches than sense. Captain Alaric Voss stood at the helm, punching buttons with the finesse of a man trying to win a teddy bear from a rigged carnival game. The rest of the crew lingered nearby, each pretending to do something useful, while really just trying to ignore the fact that they were currently public enemy number one in a sector they hadn't even meant to visit. A bleep from the comms interrupted their precarious balancing act of ignorance and anxiety. Maury, their resident tech enthusiast, glanced up. Incoming message from the Zephyri. Voss sighed. Let's see what our adoring fans want now. Maury patched the message through, and a hologram flickered into existence. Eager, leader of a particularly zealous faction of Zephyri, appeared. He had the kind of face that suggested he'd skipped straight to the angry part of life without bothering with the rest. Humans, Eager began, voice dripping with disdain. Your presence desecrates our sacred territory. You must prove your divinity or face annihilation. Friendly chap, Jax muttered, adjusting his socks. Maybe he just needs a hug. Voss rolled his eyes. Hugs are probably against their religion. Maury, any chance we can broadcast a miracle on short notice? Define miracle, Maury said, tapping away at his console. Because I can make the lights blink really fast if that helps. Preferably something that doesn't risk blowing us up, Leora added. She leaned against the wall, arms crossed, the very picture of calm under pressure, if calm meant pretending the pressure didn't exist. Voss scratched his head, considering their options. Eager, buddy, listen. We're on a bit of a cosmic road trip and took a wrong turn. No divinity here, just some travelers with bad luck. Eager's hologram did not seem impressed. Your excuses grow tiresome. Prove your worth or face our wrath. Didn't think that would work, Voss muttered, running a hand through his hair. Jax, any ideas that don't involve socks? Jax shrugged. Could always stall. Maybe offer them a piece of tech they can't resist. Like a broken toaster, Leora suggested, nodding at Maury's pet project on the nearby table. Please, Maury said, looking offended. This toaster's a work in progress. It's got potential. Voss leaned back in his chair, staring at the hologram of Eager. All right, Eager. Give us a little time to prepare our divine demonstration. We promise it'll be worth the wait. Eager's eyes narrowed. You have one cycle. Fail and you will be obliterated. Thanks, appreciate it, Voss said, cutting the connection before Eager could add any more threatening adjectives. Well, looks like we're stuck between a rock and a hard place, and the rock's on fire, Leora sighed. Why do the bad guys never take a rain check? Same reason they never stop to ask for directions, Jax quipped. Ego's too big. So, what are we going to do? Maury asked, glancing at the alien interface he was still trying to crack. First, we figure out what these zealots want, Voss said. Then we give them just enough to keep us alive. You mean lie, Leora said. Yeah, but in a really convincing way, Voss replied. Maury looked thoughtful, his fingers pausing on the console. We might be able to use their own tech against them. If I can hack into their systems, we could stage a small divine miracle. And if you can't hack it, Jax asked. Then we're divinely screwed, Maury admitted. Sounds like a plan, Leora said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. One that could either save us or turn us into cosmic dust. High stakes are the only kind worth playing, Voss said with a grin. Get to work, Maury. Let's see if we can convince them we're divine without getting vaporized. Maury nodded, already lost in the alien code. The rest of the crew settled into a tense waiting game, each trying not to think about what would happen if Eager lost patience, or worse, if they succeeded and accidentally cemented their role as false gods. We're living a cosmic nightmare, Leora said, shaking her head. One with really bad special effects. Tell me about it, Jax agreed. But hey, at least it's never boring. The Iors ticked by, each one heavier than the last. Maury worked like a man possessed, his eyes never leaving the screen, muttering to himself like a mad prophet decoding the language of the stars. Finally, he leaned back, looking more exhausted than triumphant. I think I've got something. A way to hijack their systems and stage a light show they won't forget. Define light show, Voss said, wary. Think disco meets divine revelation, Maury replied. We flood their sensors with holy signals. If all goes well, they'll see what they want, a sign. And if it doesn't work, Leora asked. We'll probably find out what it feels like to be a shooting star, Maury replied. Cheery thought, Jax said. Let's hope these zealots have a taste for theatrics, Voss nodded. All right, let's pull off the greatest show this side of the galaxy. Maury, make it happen. With a few keystrokes, Maury initiated the sequence. The ship's lights dimmed, and outside an array of colors burst forth, dancing across space like a celestial ballet. The crew watched, breath held as the display unfolded. Looks believable enough, Leora said, eyes wide. Now we just need them to buy it, Jax added. The comms crackled to life, Eager's voice filling the cabin once more. What is this trickery? Not trickery, Voss said smoothly. A testament to our celestial ties. Leora suppressed a laugh. If we pull this off, I'm demanding a raise. You and me both, Voss said. Eager was silent, the kind of silence that suggested he was either considering their offer or choosing the best weapon to vaporize them with. We will deliberate, he finally said. Do not attempt to flee or the wrath of the Zephyri will be upon you. Wouldn't dream of it, Voss replied, cutting the comms once again. He turned to his crew, his grin both tired and relieved. Well, that's bought us some time. But we're still walking a tightrope. One wrong step, Leora said, and we're toast. Let's just hope our toaster miraculously works when we need it, Maury joked, though his laughter was hollow. The Odyssey drifted in the void, the cloaked tension a constant reminder that their situation was far from resolved. They had played their hand, and now they waited to see if the bluff would hold. Think they'll come around? Jax asked, studying the stars as if they held the answer. Maybe, Voss said, though he didn't sound convinced. Or they'll decide we're worth more as cosmic fertilizer. Always the optimist, Leora said, nudging him. Hey, I've got a reputation to maintain, Voss replied with a lopsided grin. The wait stretched on, each moment a test of wills between their nerves and the universe's sense of humor. They had danced on the knife's edge and managed not to fall, yet. But the dance was far from over, and the music was set to a tempo that could change at any moment. As they waited, each crew member found solace in their own way. Jax checked the ship systems, pretending that mundane tasks could keep the impending doom at bay. Leora paced, her steps a rhythm that matched the pulse of the unknown. Maury continued to tweak the alien systems, trying to ensure that their divine facade wouldn't crumble under scrutiny. And Voss watched them all, feeling the weight of leadership pressing down like gravity on a dying star. It was the kind of responsibility he had never wanted, yet couldn't escape, a cosmic joke with a punchline he was still waiting to hear. Time's up, Maury announced, breaking the silence. We're about to find out if we're heroes or martyrs. The comms flared to life once more, Eager's image filling the room. He looked just as stern as before, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of doubt, perhaps fear. We have deliberated, Eager said, his voice heavy with decision. Your display has convinced some, but not all. You have until the next cycle to prove your intentions. Fail, and there will be no mercy. Understood, Voss said, his voice steady. We'll do what we can. Eager's hologram vanished, leaving the crew in a silence that felt more oppressive than any threat. They had won a reprieve, but the clock was ticking and the odds were still against them. Well, Voss said, turning to his crew, looks like we've got our work cut out for us. Let's see if we can pull another miracle out of our hats, or out of our asses, Jax added with a grin. Same difference, Leora said. Let's just make sure we don't run out of miracles before we run out of luck. With renewed determination, the crew set to work. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and out of their depth, but they were also stubborn, clever, and just crazy enough to think they could survive. Their fate was uncertain, but they weren't ready to go down without a fight. Not yet. Not when there was still a chance to turn the cosmic joke back on itself. And so, the Odyssey flew on, a small ship in a vast universe carrying a crew of humans who dared to defy the gods and live to tell the tale, if they could survive one more cycle. Here's to surviving, Voss said, raising an imaginary glass. To surviving, the crew echoed, ready to face whatever the stars had in store. The Odyssey hung silent in the void, a single, stubborn speck against the vast, uncaring backdrop of space. From the bridge, Captain Alaric Voss watched the stars as if they might blink out a solution to their little divine predicament. Spoiler alert, they didn't. Instead, the comms buzzed to life, a harbinger of more immediate problems. Eager had returned, and apparently he wasn't the patient type. Your time is up, false prophets, he declared, voice static-laden and as welcoming as a black hole. Voss sighed, more out of habit than hope. Guess they didn't buy the fireworks, he said, turning to his crew. Ideas, Jax, ever the optimist, shrugged. We could always surrender. I hear the afterlife has a great dental plan. Leora rolled her eyes, arms crossed like she was trying to keep herself from throttling someone. If we're going down, might as well make it a memorable exit. Maury, any chance we could use that toaster as a weapon? Maury looked up from his beloved broken toaster, eyes wide with the manic gleam of a man who had once tried to fix a plasma leak with duct tape. If I overcharge the heating element, it might fry their sensors. Of course, it could also take us out. So, 50-50. Like those odds, Voss said. All right, let's see if we can turn breakfast appliances into instruments of war. The ship shuddered beneath them, the warning klaxons blaring a dirge of impending doom. Eager's forces had begun their assault, a flurry of energy blasts lighting up the black like a macabre light show. Shields holding, Jax reported, tapping at the console with the air of a man who knows the house always wins. For now, Maury added, furiously working at his own station. But they're not gonna last under that much firepower. Story of our lives, Voss muttered. Can we even fight back? We can try, Leora said, tapping her foot like she was keeping time with the universe's cruel joke. They had a few outdated blasters, relics from a bygone era when their ship was more than a glorified coffin with engines. Against Eager's dreadnought, it was like throwing rocks at a battleship, but rocks were all they had. "All right, crew," Voss said, steeling himself for what felt like the last stand again. "Let's show these zealots that we're not the sort of gods who go down quietly." Maury grabbed the toaster, a makeshift weapon in the hands of a desperate man. Time to see if breakfast really is the most important meal of the day. The Odyssey lurched to life, engines roaring as the ship surged to dodge incoming fire. Voss gripped the arm of his chair, feeling every bump and jolt as if it were the universe personally tapping him on the shoulder to remind him of his mortality. "Keep us moving, Jax," Voss ordered. "Make us a hard target, like dancing with a porcupine," Jax replied, his hands a blur over the controls. Prickly but possible. Leora took the weapons station, fingers flying over the console. "I'll see if I can give them a few love taps. Might not do much, but maybe it'll make us feel better." As the Odyssey twisted and turned, Maury worked feverishly, jury-rigging the toaster into something no sane person would dare to call a weapon. Voss watched him, half expecting the thing to explode in Maury's hands. "Almost there," Maury said, voice a mix of excitement and terror. "Just a little more juice and we can give them a nasty surprise." Voss nodded, though he felt more like he was agreeing to his own execution. "Good. Let's see if we can give Eager a reason to reconsider his career choice." The dreadnought loomed, a hulking silhouette that seemed to swallow the stars. Its weapons were relentless, each barrage shaking the Odyssey closer to oblivion. Yet somehow they held, a stubborn fly refusing to be swatted. "Ready, Captain," Maury called, his voice barely audible over the cacophony. Firing toaster now, the ship shuddered, and for a moment Voss feared Maury had doomed them all. But then across the void the dreadnought flickered, its sensors overwhelmed by the sudden burst of energy. "Direct hit," Leora announced, sounding more surprised than triumphant. "They're scrambling. Looks like we fried something important." Voss allowed himself a small grin. "Leave it to us to weaponize breakfast. Nice work, Maury." "In time, Captain," Maury said, his relief almost palpable. The reprieve was short-lived. Eager wasn't the sort to give up so easily, and soon the dreadnought resumed its assault, albeit with a bit more caution. "We can't keep this up," Jax said, his voice strained. "They're gonna wear us down sooner or later." "Then we need a new plan," Voss replied, though he had no idea what that plan might be. Leora glanced at him, her expression a mix of defiance and resignation. "We've got one chance, Captain. We hit them where it hurts and hope they decide we're not worth the trouble." "And where exactly would that be?" Voss asked. "Their command center," Leora answered, pointing to a spot on the screen where the dreadnought's defenses seemed weakest. "If we can take it out, we might convince Eager to back off." Voss considered the odds, which were roughly as good as a snowball's chance in the sun. But they were out of options, and surrender wasn't on the table. Not yet. "All right," he said, steeling himself for what was likely a suicide mission. "We go for the throat. Jax, get us in close. Leora, prepare a full salvo for that breach." "And the toaster?" Maury asked, clutching his makeshift weapon like a talisman. "Keep it ready," Voss said, "in case they need a reminder of what we're capable of." The Odyssey surged forward, engines straining as they plunged into the heart of the storm. Voss felt the vibrations through his bones, each impact a reminder of how very mortal they were. "Steady," he said, more to himself than his crew. "Just a little closer." The dreadnought loomed larger, its defenses intensifying as they drew near. Voss watched the display, counting down the seconds until they were within range. "Now, Leora," he ordered, voice firm. "Give them everything we've got." The Odyssey's weapons fired, a desperate barrage aimed at the weak spot in the dreadnought's armor. The impact was immediate, a burst of light and energy that lit up the void. "Direct hit," Leora confirmed, though her voice was tinged with something like disbelief. "They're pulling back." Voss exhaled, feeling the tension in his chest ease just a fraction. Looks like we've bought ourselves a little more time. For now, Jax added, but they'll be back. Then we'll be ready, Voss said, though he wasn't entirely sure how. Captain, Maury interrupted, his tone more earnest than usual. I think I might have found a way to use their tech to our advantage, something that could give us a real edge. Voss turned to him, curious despite himself. Go on. Maury gestured to the alien interface, where he'd spent countless hours deciphering their code. If I can tap into their systems, I might be able to create a feedback loop, something that could disrupt their main power. A long shot, Leora said, eyeing Maury like she was trying to decide if he was a genius or just insane. More like a miracle, Maury admitted. But I think I can do it. Voss weighed the risk, which was monumental, against the potential payoff, which was survival. It wasn't much of a choice. All right, he said, do it. And let's pray we're not out of miracles just yet. Maury got to work, fingers dancing over the alien console with the fervor of a man possessed. The rest of the crew watched, waiting for either salvation or oblivion. The ship trembled, the dreadnought's presence looming like a shadow that refused to let them go. Voss could feel the weight of each second, pressing down like an anvil on his shoulders. Come on, Maury, he muttered, willing the engineer to succeed. Then a flash of light, a tremor through the void, and the dreadnought shuddered, its systems flickering as if caught in a storm. It's working, Maury shouted, barely containing his disbelief. We've got them. Voss felt a surge of hope, the kind that made the impossible seem almost within reach. Then let's not waste it. Jax, get us out of here. The Odyssey turned, engines flaring as they made their escape. Behind them, the dreadnought writhed, its systems in disarray. Looks like we pulled it off, Leora said, her voice a mix of relief and exhaustion. For now, Voss replied, though he knew better than to relax just yet. But let's not push our luck. The comms crackled, a final taunt from Eager reaching them as they distanced themselves. This isn't over, false prophets. We will hunt you to the edges of the universe if we must. Voss chuckled, a dark humor lacing his words. Sounds like a fun chase. See you around, Eager. The connection cut off and the crew let out a collective breath. They had survived against the odds and their own doubts. Here's to surviving another day, Voss said, exhaustion seeping into his voice. To surviving, the crew echoed, though they knew the journey was far from over. With the dreadnought fading into the distance, the Odyssey sailed on through the void, a testament to human stubbornness and the kind of luck that only seemed to favor the foolish. Voss watched the stars, feeling the weight lift just a little. They weren't out of the woods, not by a long shot, but for now they had each other and the hope that somehow they might just make it through. And that, for the moment, was enough. The Odyssey limped through the void, its battered hull a testament to the kind of resilience only a crew of fools and madmen could muster. Captain Alaric Voss, slouched in his chair on the bridge, watched the stars slide past like a bad rerun he couldn't switch off. The universe's cruel joke continued, as usual. Remind me again why we decided to be space adventurers, Voss asked, scratching the stubble on his chin. Not sure I signed up for being a target in a cosmic shooting gallery. Because the salary is out of this world, Leora suggested, not looking up from the console she was half-heartedly repairing with a spanner and a lot of wishful thinking. Yeah, if by out of this world you mean non-existent, Voss muttered. I could have been a bartender. People come to you, they pay you, nobody's firing plasma cannons. Unless it's a really rough night, Jax chimed in, spinning his chair to face the captain. But hey, at least we're not dead. Yet. High bar we've set for ourselves, Voss said dryly. Survive today, maybe die tomorrow. What an inspiring motto. The bridge's door whooshed open and Chief Engineer Maury walked in, hands stained with grease and a wide grin plastered on his face like he'd just won the lottery, or maybe robbed it. You look too happy, Maury, Voss commented, narrowing his eyes. Did you finally find a way to turn our toaster into a death ray? Better, Maury replied, holding up a data pad glowing with indecipherable symbols. I found some ancient Zephyri text in their systems. It's a prophecy or something like that. Great, Leora said, rolling her eyes. We go from being accidental gods to accidental prophets. What's next, accidental universe rulers? You jest, but this could be our ticket out, Maury insisted, brandishing the data pad like it was the Holy Grail. The text talks about sky people bringing unity to the Zephyri. That's us. Sure, because nothing screams unity like being shot at by half the galaxy, Voss replied, eyeing the pad with a mix of skepticism and faint hope. How do you know it's not just their version of a grocery list? Call it a hunch, Maury said with a shrug, and a little help from their translation matrix. Look, it's a long shot, but if we can convince the Zephyri we're these sky people, we might be able to broker some kind of peace. Leora leaned back in her chair, regarding Maury with a newfound interest. So you're saying we turn this prophecy into a PR campaign, sell peace and love instead of fire and brimstone, more like sell not getting blown to pieces, Jax added. Sounds like a solid pitch. Voss glanced around the bridge, taking in the weary yet determined faces of his crew. They were tired, battered, but still standing. The universe hadn't beaten them yet. All right, he said, feeling the familiar twinge of crazy optimism that always seemed to precede their most harebrained schemes. Let's sell it. If this prophecy can get the zealots off our backs, it's worth a shot. So, what's the plan? Jax asked, spinning his chair back to face his console. Do we just hail Eager and say, hey, sorry about the toaster incident, but we're actually here to save your bacon? Yeah, because that'll go over well, Voss said, sarcasm thick as the tension in the room. First, we need to figure out how to present this to them without sounding like we're making it up as we go, which, to be fair, we are. Maury waved the data pad. We've got leverage here. Their systems recognize the text, and we can use that to add some credibility. It's not foolproof, but it might be enough to get Eager's attention and maybe more. And what if they don't buy it? Leora asked, raising an eyebrow. You know, aside from blowing us into stardust. Then we've got bigger problems than a lack of faith, Voss replied, grimacing. But sitting around waiting for them to finish us off isn't an option. This is our chance to turn the tables. The crew nodded, the weight of their situation not lost on any of them. The dreadnought was still out there, a looming reminder that their current reprieve was temporary. All right, Voss said, straightening in his seat and feeling the flickers of determination reignite. Let's put this prophecy to work. Jax, open a channel to Eager. Let's see if we can talk our way out of this mess. Channel open, Jax confirmed, his fingers dancing over the controls. A moment later, the holographic image of Eager materialized on the bridge, his expression one of impatient disdain. You again, he said, his voice carrying the kind of weariness that only came from dealing with persistent nuisances. I thought I made myself clear. Submit or be destroyed. Voss leaned forward, adopting the kind of diplomatic tone that was about as natural to him as a fish riding a bicycle. Eager, we've come across something in your systems, an ancient prophecy about sky people bringing unity. We believe that's us. Eager's expression shifted, a flicker of interest breaking through his stoic facade. An intriguing claim. But why should I believe anything you say? Because your systems recognize the text, Maury interjected, holding up the data pad. We're not here to destroy. We might actually be able to help. Help us how? Eager asked, skepticism dripping from every word. With more makeshift weaponry. We have no interest in fighting you, Voss said. We stumbled into this mess just trying to survive. But if there's a chance to make peace instead of war, isn't it worth exploring? Eager considered their words, a silent calculation visible behind his eyes. And what do you require in return? He asked, suspicion lacing his voice. Just a chance to talk, Leora replied, her voice steady and sincere. To show you what we've found and explore what it could mean for both of us. Eager paused, the weight of his decision etched across his hardened features. Finally, he nodded, a reluctant acceptance. Very well, I will grant you an audience, but understand this, if this is a trick there will be no mercy. Wouldn't dream of it, Voss replied with a slight smirk. We wouldn't want to ruin our chances at becoming your spiritual guides. The hologram flickered out, leaving the crew in tense silence. They had secured a meeting, a chance to prove their unlikely claim and perhaps broker a peace. It was a long shot, but at least it was a shot. "Looks like we've got a date with destiny," Jax quipped, breaking the silence. "Or at least with Eager's hospitality." "Let's hope his hospitality involves fewer laser cannons," Leora said dryly. "I'm not in the mood for more target practice." Maury tapped the data pad, a grin still playing on his lips. "We've got a chance here, folks. Let's make sure we don't blow it." "Couldn't have said it better myself," Voss agreed. He leaned back in his chair, feeling the burden of leadership settle a little lighter on his shoulders. "Let's make history, or at least avoid becoming it." The Odyssey continued its journey, a battered ship with a battered crew, hopeful in spite of themselves. They had a plan, a prophecy, and just enough reckless hope to think they could pull it off. As the stars blurred past, Voss allowed himself a rare moment of optimism. Against the odds and their own better judgment, they were still in the game, and for the first time in a long while, it felt like they might just have a winning hand. "To the Sky People," Voss said, raising an imaginary glass. "May they be as stubborn and lucky as we are." "To not getting blown up," Leora added with a grin. The crew echoed the toast, their voices mingling with the hum of the ship as they sped towards what could be either salvation or destruction. But for now, they had each other, a plan, and the audacity to believe they could change their fate. And that, against all expectations, was enough to keep them going. Captain Alaric Voss sat in the captain's chair, which, despite being as comfortable as a bed of nails, was the best seat in the house. He tapped his fingers on the armrest, the tension in the bridge as thick as a planetary blockade. The Odyssey limped through space, held together with little more than hope and Maury's increasingly dubious engineering. "So, what's the plan again?" Jax asked, breaking the silence that had been filled only by the hum of the ship. "We just talk at Eager until he gets bored and decides not to kill us, pretty much," Voss replied, adjusting his disheveled coat. "We'll sell him the prophecy like it's the last piece of cake at a fat camp. If we're lucky, he'll choke on the crumbs of peace and leave us alone." "Not a great image," Leora said, rolling her eyes as she fidgeted with a loose wire under her console. "But it beats getting vaporized." Maury, ever the optimist, tapped the data pad with the prophecy. "Look, we have something they value, ancient gibberish that might just save our skins. Let's make sure we use it wisely." "Talking our way out of a mess," Voss mused. "I suppose it's better than fighting our way out. Less chance of losing a limb, or our ship," Jax added. "Though I'm not sure how much more of a beating the Odyssey can take." "She'll hold," Voss said, patting the armrest affectionately as though assuring a beloved pet. "Or at least pretend to until we're done with this farce." The bridge's lights flickered, a reminder that the Odyssey's temperamental systems were as reliable as a politician's promises. "Let's get this show on the road," Voss said, nodding to Jax. Jax keyed in a sequence on his console and the holographic communication system buzzed to life. The familiar image of Eager shimmered into view, his expression as welcoming as a tax audit. "You have news for me, Captain Voss," Eager intoned, his voice a blend of skepticism and impatience. "Indeed, we do," Voss replied, his tone measured and diplomatic, at least as diplomatic as he could manage. "We believe we have a solution to our little standoff here." Eager's eyes narrowed. "A solution or another diversion. A bit of both, depending on your perspective," Voss admitted, suppressing a smirk. "We've uncovered an ancient prophecy in your systems, Sky People bringing unity and peace. That's us." Eager blinked, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. "You expect me to believe you are these Sky People?" "Based on what?" "Based on the fact that your own systems authenticated the text," Maury piped up, holding the data pad like a prized possession. "And the fact that we're still talking instead of firing." Leora leaned forward, her gaze fixed on Eager's hologram. "We've come to make amends, not war." "Maybe that's worth considering before you make us the main course at your next strategic meeting." Eager hesitated, the weight of his decision visible in the tight line of his jaw. "And if I entertain this notion, what do you propose?" Voss exchanged a glance with his crew before responding. "We propose a dialogue. Let us show you what we've learned, and perhaps we can find a way forward that doesn't end with us as space debris." The hologram crackled slightly, an ominous sound that mirrored Voss's inner anxiety. Eager studied them, eyes like a hawk assessing whether to swoop or retreat. "Very well," he conceded at last. "You have your audience. But remember, Captain, I am not a man to be trifled with." "Wouldn't dream of it," Voss replied with a nod. "I like my trifling with less risk of annihilation." The hologram faded, leaving the bridge in silence once more. Voss let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Step one was done. Now they just had to convince a suspicious warlord and his zealots that they were saviors, not pests. "Well," Jack said, breaking the silence with a chuckle, "that went better than I expected. I thought he'd hang up and nuke us from orbit." "Not over yet," Leora reminded them, her tone sober. "We still have to sell this prophecy like it's the greatest thing since gravity. Speaking of which, let's make sure we have something to show," Maury added, tapping away at his console. "I've patched the translation matrix into our systems. We can project the prophecy during the meeting." Voss nodded, feeling the familiar mix of dread and determination that always accompanied their more creative plans. "All right, team. Let's get ready to make history, or at least buy ourselves a little more time in this galaxy." The crew sprang into action, the bridge buzzing with renewed energy. Voss watched them work, his heart a little lighter despite the odds. They were battered but not broken. Not yet. As they prepared for the meeting with Eager, Voss couldn't help but think about the unlikely path that had brought them here. A crew of misfits and dreamers, standing up to the universe's chaos with nothing but a glimmer of hope and a dash of madness. "To us," he muttered under his breath, feeling the weight of their journey in every word. "May we always find a way." The meeting room on the Odyssey was cramped, littered with mismatched chairs and flickering screens. It was hardly the setting for a diplomatic summit, but it was what they had, and that would have to do. Eager's image appeared on the largest screen, his expression impassive but attentive. Voss and his crew faced him, their collective determination a palpable force in the room. "Welcome to our little corner of the universe," Voss greeted, waving a hand to indicate the less-than-stellar surroundings. "I apologize for the lack of refreshments. We're currently on a buy-job basis." Eager's eyes flicked over the room, taking in the haphazard setup. "Charming," he said, voice dripping with irony. "I assume you've brought me here for more than a tour of your ship." "Quite right," Voss said, gesturing for Maury to begin. "Maury, if you do the honors." Maury stepped forward, connecting his data pad to the ship's main display. The projection flickered to life, illuminating the room with the symbols of the ancient prophecy. "Here it is," Maury explained, pointing to the characters. "The text speaks of unity and peace, brought by outsiders, the Sky People. It aligns with many Zephyri beliefs, the ones about a new era." Eager studied the projection, his expression unreadable. "And you claim to be these Sky People?" Voss shrugged. "Claim might be a strong word. We're the accidental tourists who stumbled into the role. But if there's a chance to use this prophecy to broker peace, isn't it worth exploring?" Eager's gaze didn't waver. "Why should I trust you, Captain? You've brought chaos to our doorstep." "Because," Leora interjected, her voice firm, "we don't want war any more than you do. We're offering a chance to prove it." Jax leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Besides, Eager, if we wanted to start a war, we'd do it with more style. This is about finding a way forward that doesn't end with us all as cosmic dust." There was a pause, the room thick with tension as Eager considered their words. Finally, he spoke, each word deliberate and weighty. "Show me what you intend to do with this prophecy." Maury gestured to the screen, manipulating the projection to highlight key points of the text. "We propose a cultural exchange. We share our understanding, you share yours. Together, we can redefine this narrative." Eager watched the display, his skepticism battling with something else, curiosity perhaps, or a cautious hope. And if this fails, then at least we tried, Voss replied, meeting Eager's gaze. Better to try and fail than to never try at all, wouldn't you say? Eager's silence was heavy, the decision before him immense. The crew waited, each second a small eternity. Finally, Eager nodded, a slight but unmistakable gesture of acceptance. "Very well, Captain," he said, his tone grudgingly respectful. "We will explore this possibility, but understand the price of failure will be high." Voss inclined his head. "We've been paying high prices our whole lives, Eager. One more won't break us." The meeting ended, the screen darkening as Eager's image disappeared. In the quiet that followed, the crew exchanged glances, a mixture of relief and disbelief on their faces. Did we just do that?" Jax asked, voice tinged with incredulity. "Did we actually convince him?" "We did," Leora confirmed, her smile wide and genuine. "I think we did." Maury exhaled a breath he'd been holding, the reality of their success sinking in. "We've bought ourselves some time, at least, and maybe a chance for peace." Voss leaned back in his chair, a rare smile tugging at his lips. "Sky people or not, we've done something here today, folks. Something good." For the first time in what felt like forever, hope flickered to life on the Odyssey. Against all odds, they'd found a way to navigate the chaos and carve out a future. It was a start, a fragile, tentative start, but it was enough. As the ship continued its journey, the crew settled into the familiar rhythm of life among the stars. The universe was still a dangerous place, full of pitfalls and perils, but for the moment, they'd secured a place within it. And that, as Voss knew all too well, was more than they could have hoped for. The Odyssey skulked through the void like a rat in a cathedral, its hull intermittently shuddering as if protesting its own continued existence. Inside, the crew busied themselves with preparations that felt half like a diplomatic mission and half like a high-stakes con job, a fact that seemed to amuse Captain Alaric Voss. "We're actually doing this," Voss said, rubbing his temples as he looked around the bridge. "We're really going to convince an entire species that we're their prophesied saviors. Either they're desperate, or we're a lot more convincing than I thought." Leora leaned back in her chair, balancing it on two legs and flashing a grin. "Or maybe they're just as gullible as we are lucky. Who knew that stumbling through ancient texts would make us the galaxy's unlikeliest peace envoys, or the likeliest suicides?" Jax muttered from his console, eyes fixed on the flickering readouts. "We've got Eager's goons watching our every move and an entire sector ready to vaporize us. What could possibly go wrong?" Chief Engineer Maury entered, still clutching the data pad like it was the Holy Grail. "Our accidental prophet status aside, it's a chance to do something meaningful," he said, ever the optimist. "We might actually change things for the better, or we could end up as cosmic roadkill," Voss said, unable to resist. "But I guess altering the course of history is worth a shot." "Who am I to argue with destiny?" Eager's approval wasn't exactly an engraved invitation, but it was close enough. The Zephyri warlord had agreed to a joint mission, repairing the ancient dreadnought and putting its formidable power to some use other than total annihilation. It was a fragile alliance, held together by duct tape and mutual desperation. The crew of the Odyssey, now reluctantly considered gods, set to work on the dreadnought alongside the Zephyri. The alien structure loomed out of the void, a hulking testament to the sort of architecture that said, "I could crush you with one hand tied behind my back." Maury was in his element, poking around the ancient tech like a kid in a candy store. "This is incredible," he breathed, eyes wide behind his goggles. "The technology here, it's unlike anything we've seen in our lifetime." Or several lifetimes, really. Leora clapped him on the shoulder. "Let's just hope it doesn't blow us to bits." I'd rather not be the subject of a cautionary tale. As the humans and Zephyri worked side by side, it became clear that their accidental alliance was more than just a convenience. Leora found herself chatting with one of the Zephyri technicians, a wiry fellow who seemed as interested in human engineering as he was wary of it. "So, you're telling me you actually fly through space in that rust bucket?" he asked, gesturing toward the Odyssey with what looked like genuine admiration. "Fly might be overstating it," Leora replied with a wry smile. "More like limp along and hope nothing important falls off. But hey, it's home," the technician chuckled, a raspy sound that echoed pleasantly in the cavernous control room. "You humans are strange creatures, fragile and yet resilient. I think we could learn from that." "Now you're making me blush," Leora said, feigning modesty. "We're just trying to survive, same as anyone. Sometimes that means pretending to be gods. Other times, it means not dying in a fiery explosion." Across the room, Voss and Eager stood side by side, overseeing the proceedings like a pair of mismatched generals. The tension between them had eased, just a fraction, but enough to make the whole endeavor feel less like a death march and more like a cooperative venture. "You've got your people working fast," Voss observed, watching as Zephyri and humans exchanged tools and instructions with a surprising degree of harmony. "We Zephyri are nothing if not efficient," Eager replied, his tone clipped but carrying a hint of grudging respect. "And your crew has proven adaptable." Voss inclined his head. It wasn't exactly high praise, but he'd learned to take what he could get. "I suppose we're all just trying to make the best of a bad situation." Eager's gaze sharpened. "Indeed. Your crew may be unconventional, but they have spirit. It will be interesting to see how this plays out. If we don't all end up as stardust," Voss quipped, because there was no better time to push his luck than when standing next to a man who could have him vaporized with a word. The repairs progressed with surprising speed, a testament to what could be achieved when two desperate groups put their heads together, and when neither side was particularly keen on sudden death. The dreadnought, once a looming threat, was slowly becoming a symbol of potential unity. Of course, not everything went smoothly. There were mishaps, minor skirmishes born of misunderstanding, and at least one incident involving a Zephyri technician and a particularly sensitive human cooking implement that had somehow ended up integrated into the dreadnought's systems. But despite the chaos, or perhaps because of it, the joint effort was inching toward success. In a rare moment of downtime, the crew gathered on the Odyssey's bridge, a motley assortment of worn-out explorers and hopeful schemers. Voss stood at the center, taking in the sight of his people, the family he'd never asked for but wouldn't trade for all the credits in the universe. "Well, team," he began, unable to suppress a smile, "we're doing it. Against all odds and better judgment, we're actually making it work. Who needs a plan when you've got desperation?" Jax replied, his cynicism a familiar comfort. "I just hope this doesn't end with us being hounded across the stars by angry zealots." Maury adjusted his goggles, still buzzing with the thrill of discovery. "I prefer to think of it as an opportunity for redemption. We were never meant to be heroes, but maybe we can at least be decent allies. Don't get me wrong, I'm all for redemption," Leora said, reclining in her chair. "I just wish it didn't involve quite so much heavy lifting. My arms aren't getting any younger." The banter was light-hearted, but the truth lingered beneath the surface like the dark matter that kept the universe from flying apart. They had stumbled into a legacy they didn't want and a responsibility they hadn't asked for, yet here they were, forging a path through the madness. Voss leaned back, gaze drifting to the stars beyond the viewport. "It's funny, isn't it? We came here by accident, chased by a reputation we didn't earn, and now we're, well, not heroes, but something close. Heroic idiots," Leora suggested with a smirk. "I think that's our official title. Better than cosmic debris," Jax interjected. "I'll take it." Eager's image crackled to life on the screen, his expression as inscrutable as ever. He surveyed the crew with an air of guarded curiosity, as if still trying to fathom how these ragtag humans had managed to alter the course of his people's history. "Captain Voss," Eager began, his voice resonant and authoritative. "I've received word from my engineers. They report that your crew has been instrumental in the repairs." Voss offered a modest shrug. "What can I say? We're good at fixing things we break. It's a survival skill." Eager nodded, perhaps the closest he'd come to acknowledging a debt. Your efforts have not gone unnoticed. Our people stand on the brink of a new era, one of cooperation rather than conflict. This is not the future we anticipated, but perhaps it is one we can embrace. Glad to hear it, Voss replied, unable to mask his relief. We never intended to be gods, eager. Just people trying to make it through the day without crashing into a black hole. Then let us hope this alliance proves as resilient as you and your crew, Eager said, his tone softening just a fraction. Perhaps there is more to be gained from unity than we ever imagined. With that, the screen winked off, leaving the crew to their thoughts. The Odyssey, once a wayward ship caught in the crossfire of fate, had found its place in the cosmos. It was an uneasy piece, still fragile and full of potential pitfalls, but it was a piece nonetheless. As the hours stretched into days, the joint venture continued, each step a testament to the power of unlikely partnerships. The dreadnought, now a symbol of possibility rather than destruction, stood poised to become a beacon for a new kind of diplomacy. On the bridge, Voss watched his crew with a mix of pride and amusement. They were a motley lot, scarred by experience and bound by shared hardships, but they were his. And together, they defied the odds, taking the first tentative steps toward a future that was no longer quite so bleak. "Here's to the sky people," he said, raising an imaginary glass. "May we always find a way." And as the Odyssey sailed into the uncertain expanse, its crew found solace in the knowledge that, for better or worse, they'd made their mark on the universe. Not as gods, perhaps, but as something far more enduring, human.